So I know that there are people listening now who just heard my last one and say, "Wait, that's too simple. That's too obvious. That can't be the great mystery of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall." Because once you're told, it's like just obvious. You think, "Why didn't you notice that before?" And and there you think, "Oh, there must be. Why didn't Marx just say it like that?" Which he did. And why isn't it taught like that? Which it is by Marxists. But a lot of people are being surrounded, sort of corralled by these bogus mystifications where it inculcates habits of expecting magic thinking or something mysterious or something priestly and debatable, something that needs a leap of faith or something. And this is, Vighi is the extreme. I mean, there are other people like Moshe Postone who who state implications, obvious implications, like that work happens over time. They say that as if that's a big discovery, like that a day has hours in it or whatever. Um, so that's it. That's the simple thing. The tendency of the rate of profit to fall. And if you go and read Marx, there are problems with the fact that it's a 19th century language that was easy for my generation to read because we read 19th century novels in school, and we're accustomed to it. And the language has become really strangely remote. For younger people, they find the 19th century as challenging as my generation might have found Shakespeare, which wasn't all that challenging, but somewhat challenging, requiring schooling. So now the 19th century language is puzzling to people, but there's a newest translation, modern translation of Capital, at least of Volume 1. I don't know, Volume 1 is constantly being taken as a finished work. There's another one coming out, but that I think is maybe easier, I don't know. But beyond that, it's really, Marx is very simple in his explanations, as are real Marxists. But there's been this giant psyop, that of course is social engineering, functions as social engineering in a way that most people who participated are unaware of. They're just being prodded along. That surrounds curious people who want to be communist intellectuals with these mystifications and mystics, and then in a genre that somehow has been sold as legit and profound and serious, imitation Derrida or imitation Lacan. It's like really dreadful stuff. Okay, so it's that simple. Now, so that's the tendency. That's a tendency. It's the conditions there are pressures then existing. It's the conditions in which people are operating. And one of the reasons that these fakes have to disguise that is because it's so obvious, the relationship between the tendency, and that the tendency is created by action of people, in a predictable way, that not every single person has to be doing this, react the same way. It's not a mechanistic idea of, people, or a moralizing idea about capitalists even. The whole idea is that somebody starts to innovate first in competition. Okay, so, and then, people can leave, they can refuse the pressures, and then they either go out of business or something else happens. Okay, so then there are things that can be done many things that can be done to counteract the falling rate of profit, that were done, that historically we can go back and see how the rate of profit was constantly buoyed up. And of course, the huge thing, the enormous world historical movement that allowed the capitalists to survive this what looked in Marx's day like, well, they're not going to last very long. And in many ways, the thing that he was describing in its real state that he described, it didn't last very long. He was already describing its abolition in the notes for the third volume that Engels wound up publishing. And by the 20th century, something else has happened, and we look to Lenin for for describing the main points of monopolization, but which is monopoly is one of the main most important things that the ruling class could do, most important measures that the capitalists could take to counteract this problem was to form monopolies. But of course, we don't see this really till the full flowering of this. But the main social project that was necessary to sustain capitalist profit was imperialism. A lot of things that come under the term imperialism, because of course the root of this problem of the falling rate of profit is the escalating so-called organic composition. This is a phrase that sometimes someone approaching Marx by themselves might be confused about, but they're talking about the rate, just exactly what I was talking about, how there's the growing cost of exploiting a laborer is the cost of the machinery or fixed capital, not just the machinery, the premises, all these other things, and the cost of the person, labor for the day, which is where the surplus value is still coming from, no matter what you do, in the system of where everything is, all production and distribution is organized in markets and globally. So one of the ways that the constant capital, one of the ways that, let's just say machinery, I'm just taking an example. This is not the entire account, of minute, thick description, but one of the ways that the machinery is made, it doesn't balloon and balloon. The cost of that is imperial terror, right? The imperialism, like you make you need metals, you need raw materials. These are made very, very cheap to the capitalist by state imperial terror, imperial violence. That is, the cost of it is shifted to the workers. So in fact, Marx's formula is still holding. The rate of profit is falling notionally. I mean, in the model, the organic composition is going up. The cost of the machinery is not actually getting cheaper. It's getting cheaper for the capitalist. And because you have to subtract like the cost of the military that keeps the raw materials cheap. And we see how costly that is. But the capitalists don't have to sustain that cost. They shift it to the workers, and especially the higher wage workers. So dividing, the ranks of the working class, the division of the working class and its hierarchization is essential, comes into being. These tactics are discovered in the course of the capitalist struggle, the winning capitalists, because the losers just go out of business. The capitalist struggle against the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. That is the tendency, the situation where they find they have to spend more and more to get a little bit of profit, that they have to get, that they're getting less and less for the chunk of capital that they have. And of course there's innovations of shifting capital, bubble and shrink and all this stuff, and it does get sort of empirically complicated, yet it remains theoretically super simple. It's exactly the forces that I just described is the main dynamic that's being opposed, and imperialism is a giant strategy, a strategic effort to battle this, at the same time to transform it to get rid of it, to overcome it, to sublate this condition. But also, of course, because it's empirically so complicated, a lot of other things come up that have to be dealt with, like you're trying to, and that is what people have to understand about money, is that this is an inherited condition, money and capital, as a development of money, as a in terms of its form, its notional abstract form, that itself has built-in contradictions and problems, and it's so unwieldy thing. And I'm remembering this. I love this short story about the werewolf story by Tommaso Landolfi, a writer of the fantastic. And it's just it's everything. It's a kind of anti-Nietzschean, upside down, super critical vision of ideology, of an ideological form that it takes up, which is the werewolf. So he's got the two werewolves. The werewolf, and it's talking about how he and his friend, they hate the moon. The moon, and we, of course, in the moon, our culture, of course, is a sexy symbol, and it belongs to poetry and music and moonlight and et cetera, et cetera. It has a lot of connotations, and they reverse them. For the werewolves, if you're enslaved to that cultural, if you're enslaved to this thing, and it runs your life, it's awful. And so they decide, the moon, they can't stand it, on a full moon, it drives them crazy, it tortures them and makes them transform into werewolves and everything. So they decide to capture it. They're going to keep it from rising. And they capture it, and it's sleazy, it's slimy, it stinks. It's like, you're starting to think of it's like a phlegm. It's just repulsive, and they cover it in ashes and try to capture it and hold it behind the radiator. There was a reason I told that story, and I'm going to explain it in the next episode.